What if I told you? One of the most powerful companies in the world started by nearly going bankrupt, and almost no one noticed it rising, until it was too late. Today, NVIDIA isn't just a tech company. It's the backbone of artificial intelligence, the engine behind trillion-dollar industries, and the reason the biggest companies on Earth are in a silent arms race. But here's the crazy part. NVIDIA didn't plan this. They just made one decision that changed everything. Back in 1993, 3 engineers sat in a Denny's restaurant. No fancy office, no investors, just an idea. One of them, Jensen Huang, believed something radical, that computers wouldn't just process data, they would simulate reality. At the time, that sounded ridiculous. The tech world was focused on CPUs, the brains of computers. But Huang saw something different. He believed graphics, visuals, simulation would become just as important. So they built NVIDIA around a bold idea: specialized chips for graphics. But here's the problem. They were too early. Their first products? Flops. The company burned through cash. At one point, NVIDIA had just 30 days of money left. They were on the edge of collapse. One wrong move, and NVIDIA would have disappeared forever. Then in 1999, everything changed. NVIDIA launched the GeForce 256. It wasn't just a graphics card. It was the world's first GPU, a graphics processing unit. And it did something revolutionary. Instead of processing tasks one by one like a CPU, it processed thousands at the same time, parallel computing. At first it was marketed for gaming, better graphics, faster rendering, more immersive worlds. Gamers loved it, but NVIDIA didn't realize yet, they had just created something far bigger than gaming. Years later, researchers started experimenting with GPUs, not for games, but for science. They realized GPUs could handle massive calculations, far better than traditional CPUs. Things like physics simulations, weather modeling, molecular biology, and then machine learning. This was the turning point, because machine learning requires something GPUs are perfect at, running millions of calculations simultaneously. NVIDIA saw this and made a move that most people ignored. They built CUDA, a platform that let developers use GPUs for general computing. At the time, almost nobody cared. It wasn't flashy. It didn't make headlines. But it quietly turned NVIDIA into something else, not a gaming company, but a computing powerhouse. Fast forward to the 2010s, artificial intelligence starts to take off, and suddenly, everyone needs GPUs. Companies like Google, Amazon, Microsoft all racing to build AI systems. And what do they all need? NVIDIA chips. Then came the explosion. Chatbots, image generation, self-driving technology. AI went from niche to unstoppable. And NVIDIA was holding the keys. Their chips became the gold standard. Their demand skyrocketed. Their stock went parabolic. At one point, NVIDIA became one of the most valuable companies in the world, surpassing companies that had been dominant for decades, and it all came from that one decision, to bet on parallel computing before anyone else understood it. But here's what most people get wrong. NVIDIA didn't just win because of hardware. They won because of ecosystem control. CUDA locked developers into their platform, meaning if you build on NVIDIA, switching becomes incredibly hard. This created a powerful moat. While competitors focused on chips, NVIDIA built an entire software plus hardware empire, and that's why even today, companies trying to compete with NVIDIA are years behind. Because behind the scenes, a new battle has already started. And this time, it's not just startups, it's the biggest companies on Earth. Companies like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft are no longer just customers. They're becoming competitors. Why? Because relying on NVIDIA is becoming a problem. Right now, if you want to build powerful AI, you need NVIDIA chips. There's no real alternative at the same scale, and that creates a dangerous situation. These tech giants are spending billions of dollars just to keep up. Imagine building your entire business on someone else's technology. Your costs go up, your control goes down, and your future depends on a company you don't own. That's why companies like Google are building their own chips, like the TPU. Amazon is developing its own AI hardware. Microsoft is investing heavily in custom silicon. They all want the same thing: freedom from NVIDIA. This isn't a loud war. There are no headlines, no dramatic announcements, but make no mistake, this is a technological arms race. On one side, NVIDIA, with years of dominance, a powerful ecosystem, and software that's deeply embedded everywhere. On the other side, some of the richest companies in history, with unlimited resources, and one goal: catch up. But here's the catch. Even with all that money, they're still behind. Because NVIDIA isn't just selling chips, they're selling time, years of research, years of optimization, years of developer loyalty, and that's incredibly hard to replicate. So if NVIDIA is so far ahead, how could they possibly lose? History gives us a clue. Tech leaders don't usually fall slowly, they fall suddenly. All it takes is one shift, one breakthrough, one new way of doing things. That makes the old system obsolete. Just like GPUs once replaced older methods, something new could replace GPUs, and if that happens, the entire industry could flip overnight. So here's what smart investors are watching. Not just who's winning today, but who's building the future. Because somewhere out there, a small team, a new idea, or a breakthrough technology could already be in motion. And if history has taught us anything, it's this. The biggest winners almost always start invisible. Back in the early 2000s, almost no one took NVIDIA seriously outside of gaming. Before that, people underestimated companies like Amazon, just an online bookstore; Google, just a search engine; Apple, just computers. The pattern is always the same. Something looks small, niche, even irrelevant, until suddenly it isn't. So where could the next breakthrough come from? Right now, there are a few areas that could completely reshape the AI landscape. First, custom AI chips. Instead of general-purpose GPUs, companies are designing chips for specific tasks. Faster, cheaper, more efficient. Second, AI model efficiency. What if you didn't need massive hardware at all? What if smaller models could perform just as well? That alone could disrupt NVIDIA's dominance, because if AI requires less power, you need fewer GPUs. And third, completely new computing architectures, not better GPUs, not faster chips, but something entirely different. And this is where things get interesting. There are technologies right now that most people barely understand, but could change everything, like quantum computing. Still early, still experimental, but if it works at scale, it could solve problems that today's computers can't even touch. Or neuromorphic computing, systems designed to mimic the human brain. Instead of brute force calculations, they learn and adapt more naturally. These aren't mainstream yet, but neither was AI, just a decade ago. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because disruption doesn't come from what's obvious, it comes from what's overlooked. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people won't see the next NVIDIA coming, because it won't look important at first. It won't dominate headlines. It won't be worth trillions overnight. In fact, it might look like a bad investment, a risky idea, or even a failure. Just like NVIDIA did, when it was burning cash and fighting to survive. The opportunity always feels uncertain, right before it becomes obvious. And by the time everyone agrees, it's already too late. So how do you spot it early? You don't chase hype. You don't follow trends. You look for technology that solves a real bottleneck. Teams obsessed with a long-term vision and products that seem unnecessary until they aren't, because that's exactly what NVIDIA had. But here's the part most people still don't understand. NVIDIA's real advantage wasn't just technology, it was patience. While everyone else was chasing short-term wins, NVIDIA was building for a future. That didn't exist yet. They invested in GPUs before AI needed them. They built CUDA before developers cared. For years, it looked like overkill, like wasted effort. But when the world finally caught up, NVIDIA was already waiting. And this is where most companies fail. They either have the right idea at the wrong time or the right timing with no real vision. NVIDIA had both. They saw where computing was going and had the discipline to stay the course, even when it wasn't paying off. That's incredibly rare, because building for the future means surviving the present, and most companies don't make it that far. Being early sounds like an advantage, but in reality, it's a risk. You burn money, you face doubt, you look wrong for a very long time. NVIDIA lived through that. They were underestimated, ignored, almost forgotten, but they didn't pivot away from their vision. They doubled down on it, and that's the part people don't see. Success stories look obvious, only after they happen. So when you look at companies today, don't just ask, who's winning right now? Ask a better question, who's building something the world will need later? Because that's where the real opportunities are, not in what's popular, not in what's trending, but in what's quietly, inevitably, coming next. Because here's the truth, the future always looks obvious in hindsight. When people look back at NVIDIA today, it seems inevitable. Of course, AI needed powerful chips. Of course, GPUs would dominate. Of course, NVIDIA would win. But at the time, none of that was obvious. It was uncertain, risky, easy to dismiss. And that's exactly what makes the next opportunity so hard to see. Right now, we're living in one of those moments again, where something is shifting, but it hasn't fully revealed itself yet. The signals are there. New technologies, new ideas, new players entering the game. But the story isn't clear. Not yet. And that's the moment most people ignore. Because uncertainty doesn't feel comfortable. But that's also where the biggest opportunities live. There are always a few people who see it early. Not because they can predict the future perfectly, but because they pay attention differently. They notice small shifts. They question what others accept. They look where no one else is looking. And most importantly, they're willing to be wrong before they're right. That's the same mindset that built NVIDIA. A belief in something before the world agreed. So now, we're back to the same question. Not just about NVIDIA, but about everything. What is the world about to need that almost nobody is paying attention to? Because whatever that answer is, that's where the next giant will come from. And when it finally becomes obvious, it won't feel like a discovery. It will feel like it was inevitable all along.